This is part 7 of the Relapse series, and where we had left off last time, Haley had gotten caught at my sober living. The house manager there said that I had to figure something else out. And it was absolutely vital that I stay in compliance with that sober living because now my federal probation officer was involved. I should have never told him that I needed to go to rehab because I never got caught with the dirty drug test. I just voluntarily told him that I was having problems. I was still in that mindset of being honest and being transparent with my PO because up until the point that I had relapsed, I never had any reason to lie to him. But definitely should never be honest with probation or parole officers because it will always come back to fuck you. And I learned that as time went on. But basically, I was mandated to be at the sober living. Really, I was mandated to be at a rehab, but I had manipulated the situation so that I could be at this halfway house or sober living so that I could have a little more freedom. It was unexpected that I went and broke Haley out of rehab, but now that I had her, I had to figure something else out because if they told my PO that they kicked me out because I was sneaking a girl in, I could get a violation and go back to federal prison. I had a friend named Jillian, and Jillian was a girl that I had hung out with growing up in Santa Barbara. She was kind of like one of those girls that all my friends had sex with. I never had. She was like just, kind of like a groupie girl that was always around my group of friends. Always hung out with the bad kids. And she dated one of my best friends for like 7 years. She ended up moving to Colorado and she dated some guy out there. She got caught up. I forget what she got caught up for. I think check fraud or something. And she went to prison for 4 years. And while she was in prison, she became a lesbian. And she was living with some girl in East LA. And I knew that she was down in LA somewhere. I hadn't seen her for a really long time, but I knew that she was down there. And I needed to find some place to put Haley while I stayed at the sober living, saved up my little $120 a day, and then hopefully get a monthly motel or weekly motel, somewhere where I could actually give my PO an address and tell him that I wanted to live at this place with my girlfriend, even though I don't know if he was going to actually let me do that or not, because now, I had convinced him that I needed sober living or that I needed a program, but this was at least the delusional plan that I had. So I called Jillian and I explained the situation, and she told me that her and her girlfriend had just broken up, and Haley could come stay with her. She was living in East LA. And East LA is super ghetto. It's predominantly Hispanic. It's a very, very rough area. And before I'd caught my federal case back in 2008, that's where I used to go to score. She was living in this little, I don't even know how to describe it. It was smaller than a studio apartment. It was like a cubby. Like, it was a bed, a bathroom, and a door. And that's literally how you would describe this. Like, you open the door to her apartment or whatever the fuck it was, and there's just a bed, and then there's a little teeny bathroom with a shower. I'd never seen the place, but she told me that she had a place in East LA and that Haley was welcome to come there. And I was like, hey, Jillian, do not hit on my girl while I'm at work. Can you do that for me? She's like, yeah, for sure. But I definitely didn't trust her. She was one of those, she was like one of the guys. She was definitely going to make moves on my girl, and I didn't want her to do that. I even get jealous of stuff like that. Or I did at that point in my life. I've definitely moved past a lot of those insecurities and jealousy traits that I had back at that time. So I tell Jillian over the phone, I go, hey, Haley's like a hardcore drug addict, hardcore alcoholic. And last time I went to work, someone at the sober living gave her alcohol. I came back, she was wasted. She threw up, and she threw up so hard that it made her fart. And Jillian's like laughing over the phone. I'm like, do not give her alcohol. It's like pouring water on a gremlin. She turns into a different person. Jillian's like, I got you, no problem. Come drop her off. So I'm, driving Haley to the manager of the sober living. I told him that, because we had stayed at a motel the night before, and I called in from work, and I told him I was going to be late, and I told him, hey, I found a place for Haley to go. Give me the day to sort it out. I'll be home before the curfew tonight. He's like, okay, no problem, but don't miss that, or I'm going to have to kick you out of the sober living. I was like, okay. So we show up at Julian's house at like, I don't know, 10 in the morning, this little apartment. I open the door and she's wearing lingerie and she's drinking Absolute vodka out of a bottle. You know, I told her don't have alcohol around her, don't have drugs around her, and she literally opens the door in this like transparent lingerie. She has like mesh stockings on and like translucent bra where you could see her nipples, and I'm just like, Jillian, what the fuck? And she's just like, she's slurring and she's talking about how she just got in a fight with her ex-girlfriend. And she's like, come here. And she's like grabbing Haley. And Haley's kind of just looking at me like, oh my God, like, don't leave me with this predatory lesbian chick. And I'm just like, you're going to be fine. I've known this girl since I was 12. I absolutely trust her. I lied to Haley. I'm like, you know, nothing bad's going to happen when you're with this girl. Even though when I left, I was absolutely petrified because I left her and she looked at me like a deer in headlights. This little like petrified look of, oh my God, I can't believe it's like leaving your kid at daycare for the first time. That's how I felt. I was like leaving and I just look over my shoulder and I see Jillian like swaying, holding this vodka, and she's in lingerie, and Haley's like sitting there wide-eyed like, I cannot believe you're leaving me with this maniac. So I end up going to work, and you know, we weren't supposed to have cell phones there, but I put it on silent where I could still, you know, I could still feel the vibration if a text went through, if someone called. And I'm making my phone calls, doing the telemarketing, trying to set up leads for the general contractor stuff, and my phone just starts getting blown up. So I go to the bathroom, and Haley had called like 20 times, and her texts, she was leaving a lot of texts, and they were getting progressively more panicky. Like the first one was like, hey, where are you? Hey, you need to get me out of here. Hey, Julian's crazy. Hey, Julian just hit her ex-girlfriend with the hammer. There's blood everywhere. Hey, there's cops here. And I'm just like, every text message is getting worse and worse. I'm like, what the fuck? I tell my boss, I'm like, hey man, I gotta go. I'm having issues at home. And this Israeli guy just starts screaming at me. He's like, you get the fuck out of here. You'll never come back here. You are unreliable. You are junkie. You are fucking junkie. I don't even know where he got the junkie thing. He didn't know I had a drug problem, but he just kept calling me a junkie, and everybody's looking at me in this little boiler room telemarketing place. I didn't even care. I'm just like, whatever, dude. I am a junkie. Fuck you. So I leave, and I go to Julian's apartment. There's like 7 cop cars there. I'm like, oh my God. And at this point, Haley's not responding to me. Texted her a million times. I've called her. It's going straight to voicemail. I have no idea where she are. There's cops all over this complex. And I try to walk into the building, and a cop stops me, and he's like, hey, who are you? Do you have identification? And I was like, yeah. And I show him my ID. He's like, are you on probation or parole? I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take off. I didn't even want to deal with it. And cop kind of was just like, yeah, it's a good idea. You go. Like, all right, cool. So I take my ID back and I leave. I have no idea what's going on, but I go back to the sober living hoping that I'll hear from her at some point. And eventually I do, and of course she's completely wasted. And she said that a group of these like butch lesbians came over to Jillian's house, and including Jillian's ex-girlfriend. They got into some altercation. They started fighting, and Jillian's ex went and smashed all the windows out of Jillian's car. She had like this shitty old Chrysler, and Jillian somehow got the hammer out of her hand and started hitting her in the face with it. Like, she hit her ex-girlfriend in the face with a hammer several times. Her, like, you know, she broke her jaw. Like, her face literally shattered right here. She broke her cheekbone. And then a bunch of cops came, and they were on the run, and Haley had left her phone there, and she ended up, you know, getting taken in by this group of lesbians that had come over to Jillian's house. And, you know, she didn't know my phone number by heart. That's how it was in 2000. This was 2015. You know, nobody knows anybody's number by heart anymore, especially when you first meet somebody. It's not like it was in the 90s or any time before that. Well, eventually she had one of the lesbians go over to get her phone, and then she had contacted me and said she was hiding out at this house, and that Jillian was wanted by the cops for like attempted murder, like assault with a deadly weapon. I don't know, serious charges. And they were like looking everywhere at this complex for her. So once again, she has nowhere to stay because now Haley can't go back to Jillian's apartment because cops are looking for her. Who knows where Jillian went? She hit this girl with a hammer, psychopath. And now I'm dealing with Haley. She's not only is she drunk, but she's spun out on meth. She was doing speed with these lesbian girls. And she's like being all emotional. The lesbians were hitting on me. And I'm just like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Like, the only way this is going to work, I'm on federal probation. The only way this is going to work is if you stay somewhere and stay out of trouble. And she's like, how can you expect me to stay out of trouble? Your friend hit her with a hammer. And I'm like, dude, out of my control. What are we going to do? And, you know, it was like, it's the kind of thing where, I said this in Wasting Talent, 2 dead batteries don't start a car. And if you're in a relation, if you're trying to stay sober and your partner's using, there's no way you're going to stay sober. It just never, ever works that way. Seeing her drunk, seeing her out, spun out on meth, made me want to get high as well. And I had maybe $40 to my name. We had nowhere to stay. And I'm like, you know what? I got fired from my job. I'm just not going to go back to the sober living. Whatever. Completely disregard for the consequences of potentially going back to prison because I didn't want to go back there. And I'd even called and left a message on the manager of my sober living, and we did the thing where I called from my phone and then she called from her phone at the same time, so that when she called, it went directly to voicemail, and I hung up my phone and turned my phone off. That way I could leave a message on purpose and I wouldn't have to actually deal with him. That's the best little trick. If you ever have to tell somebody something but you don't want to have a back and forth dialogue, you have 2 people call the same number at the same time, and the one that goes to voicemail, you leave a message. And I made up some bullshit story about how my girlfriend was in the hospital, and come on, man, you got to cover for me. Give me a couple days to figure this out. I got to stay at this hospital and I got to figure out what's going on with her. So we had like $40 to our name. And we go downtown, Skid Row, and I buy like $40 worth of heroin. So I relapse now. So, you know, I have an X5 BMW, which is one of the SUV BMWs. It's definitely big enough for 2 people to sleep in. And, you know, it didn't matter where we were as long as we had the heroin. And I've always had that philosophy. It's like heroin, I do enough of it where I'll nod out and I just won't care where I am. I can be in a cold car. And it's like the winter in LA, which it's not like super cold, but it's not pleasant either outside. And this is like a 2006 car. It gets cold in there. Older cars, especially older SUVs, get really cold at night. And we went up into the Hollywood Hills, and we just kind of parked in some dead-end street, and we shot heroin, and we passed out. You know, we'll figure it out tomorrow type mentality. And the next morning, we wake up. We have no money. We have no food. Haley's hungover, feels like shit, and we have no more drugs. And I'm like, wow. I lost my job, and I have no idea what's going on with the sober living. I didn't even want to turn on my phone. You know, turning on my phone would be a gateway back to reality. Potentially my parents could call, my PO could call, the sober living could call. Any call that I was going to get was not going to be good. So I didn't even want to turn on my phone. And we started trying to figure out how we were going to make money. And Haley's like, well, I know a way that we can make some money. It's kind of sleazy. And I'm like, are you talking about prostitution? I've never done that. I'm proud to say it's 2015 at the time, in the decade plus that I'd been doing heroin, I'd never had to resort to that low, even though I have a lot of friends that have, but I just had never had to do that. And so I said, I really don't want to do that. And she's like, no, it's kind of like that. And I'm like, webcam porn? And she's like, no, I think we should sell my soiled underwear on Craigslist. And I was like, what? What'd you just say? And she's like, I think we should sell my soiled underwear on Craigslist. I was like, the fuck are you talking about? And she's like, no, seriously, people will buy that. I'm like, what do you mean? And she's like, look. And she had she had a duffel bag with a bunch of clothes. And she's like, look, I have 14 pairs of underwear. What we'll do is, and they were all dirty. It was like she had a bunch of dirty clothes in her duffel bag. She's like, we'll post a fake picture on Craigslist, and we'll sell the soiled underwear for $50. Just post it on a Craigslist ad. I'm like, dude, nobody's gonna fucking buy used underwear for you for $50. What are you talking about? She's like, no, when I used to live in Palm Springs, this is how I first started making money. And then some of the guys that bought my soiled underwear started, you know, asking me if I'd fuck them for money, and that's how I transitioned into prostitution. And I'm just like, well, let me stop you right here. There's no way that I'm going to sell my soiled boxers to anyone, and there's no way I'm prostituting myself to anyone. She's like, you don't have to. People will buy this. I'm like, whatever. So we go on Google Images. I'm like, you know, cute blonde girl. And like some like random girl pops up, and I make a little ad on Craigslist. I'm like, what do I put on this? And she's just like, say you're selling used panties, soiled 22-year-old college girl just trying to pay her bills. She wore, say that I wore the same underwear for 4 days straight because I had finals. I was like, wow, I feel so grimy just typing this. So I type it, and I leave, you know, her phone number on it. She wanted the phone number because she wanted, you know, she's like, if they call, I think it would be good if a girl picks up. I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't think anybody was going to call. Within 30 minutes, we get 4 calls from people. And it's like always like these older, like greasy, like Armenian dudes. And they're like, hello. And he'll be like, hi, I'm just studying right now. And do you want to buy a pair of my underwear? And she's like doing it on speaker, and she's like winking at me. And I'm just disgusted. I'm like, ugh. This chick is so fucking ratchet. And I'm just like, I'm literally perplexed that this is actually working. And we make like $150 in one day. We go meet up with these. She's telling the guys on the phone, she's like, look, I'm just a little college girl, and I'm really concerned for my safety. So I'm going to have my brother meet you. And he doesn't know what I'm selling. And I just don't think it's safe for me to meet up with you. So let's meet in this grocery store parking lot, and he'll bring you this little, you know, grocery bag with my panties in them. He doesn't know what they are, so please don't say anything. And you'd hear these guys like, they'd be like groaning and grunting on the phone. It's on speaker, so I could hear it. I'm like, fuck, I cannot even believe there's a market for shit like this. So I'd have to meet up with these guys. And like on more than one occasion, I'd go meet up with them in a parking lot. And they'd be like, you must be Ashley's brother. I'm like, yeah, I'm Ashley's brother. Did you bring me merchandise? I'm like, you mean the fucking soiled panties? It's okay. We don't need to speak in code here, sir. He's like, oh, let me see. And I'd like she'd always staple it shut. I don't know why, but she'd staple this, like we'd get paper grocery bag, put the panties inside, fold it, and she'd staple it. And I'd like give it to them, and they'd open it, and I'd watch on more than one occasion. They would just grab it, and they would be like, oh, like trembling. I'm like, hey man, are you all right? Oh, I'm like, yeah, that's $50, man. He's like, oh, takes some greasy 50 out of his pocket and gives it to me. I felt so gross. I'm like, all right, man, enjoy. And he'd just like get in his car and peel off. God knows what he's going to go do with the soiled panties. But that was like our hustle. We made like $150 the first day doing that. And so the first thing we did is we went to, I think like Gap or Ross, I don't know, some store, and got like a bunch more panties to make money. You know, economic 101, you have to invest money to make more money. So we went and bought more panties. And I was like, this is really bizarre. I didn't know that there was a market, and this was like a continuous thing. People were calling. We like ran out of panties, and people were still calling. So we had enough to go get a motel, and we had enough to get heroin, and she also wanted meth. See, I'm not a big meth guy. That's never been my drug of choice, but she was a tweaker. So every time I went and scored balloons of heroin downtown LA, she wanted me to get meth too, which is like way cheaper. I was getting, I don't really know meth prices, but I was getting like 8 balls of the stuff for like $30 or $40, which is 3.5 grams, you know. Any other drug would be like over $100 for that, but it's like 30 or $40. And then I was buying these little balloons of heroin, and at the time they were called footballs. and they looked like rat turds. They were like these balloons, and the heroin was shaped like a rat turd. It's like the best way to describe it. Probably like a .1, and you could get it for $10 downtown. And it was really good heroin at the time. So we'd be staying at these shady motels. We were staying in a little city called Winnetka. And we're staying in these motels, and we're just binging out on heroin and meth. This goes on for like 3 or 4 days. And I remember I was shooting up in my hand, and I missed one time. I was shooting what meth and heroin, which is what people call goofballs, when you mix crystal meth and heroin. You don't have to cook the meth. You just crush the shards up, put it in a spoon, add water, it liquefies, and then you can add that to the cooked heroin. It's called a goofball. Speedball is coke and heroin. Goofball is meth and heroin. And it seems like the generation after me, the IV drug users that aren't dead or in prison, that came after my generation, are all shooting meth and heroin now. When I was growing up, it was coke and heroin, but now it was meth and heroin. And Haley was like probably 24, 23, so she kind of represented that younger generation. So we were doing a lot of that, and I shot up in my hand, and I missed. And it hurt really bad. I was trying to shoot the goofball like right here in my hand. And I remember I missed, and it hurt. And I still have my phone off. I don't even want to know what's going on. At this point, I probably have a fucking warrant for my arrest. And my hand just really starts hurting, and it starts turning color. You know, it goes from like, it's an abscess, and it's like red at first. Then it starts turning dark, and then it starts turning black. And I Google it. I'm like, what happens when an abscess turns black? And it had like these red, like veiny lines like coming out of it. And it literally said on Google, if it turns black and there's red veiny lines coming out of it, go to a hospital immediately. And I was just like, hey, I think I need to go to the hospital. This is looking kind of serious. My hand was blowing up like a balloon. Like it literally, I don't know. I know there's IV heroin users that subscribe to my channel. Sometimes when you shoot an artery, you know, arteries branch out. So, like when you shoot up IV, you know, in your vein, it circulates throughout your body. Goes through, you know, it circulates. But if you shoot up and you hit an artery, it has nowhere to go. So it kind of branches out and like ends somewhere, and it blows up wherever it goes. Like your hand, it'll blow up like a balloon. If you like hit an artery in your arm, the artery goes down to your hand, and your hand will blow up like a Mickey Mouse glove for like a day. Or not a day, but, you know, a few hours. And that's exactly what happened with this shot that I had missed. My hand blew up like a Mickey Mouse glove. It was getting bigger and bigger. It was turning black. There were these little red vine, like little vine things around it. It looked really serious. So I'm like, yeah, maybe we should go to the hospital. And it was like the kind of thing where I was like, let's go to the hospital. And like 2 days later, we end up going. The whole time we're hustling used panties. That's like our primary source of revenue at the time. And we go to the hospital. We finally make it to the hospital. We go to some hospital in Sherman Oaks. And I remember pulling up to the parking lot, and my hand had gotten bad. Like it had gotten to a point where it wasn't really working anymore. I couldn't open and close it. It was just kind of like that. Like that's about as much as I could move it. And I'm driving, I'm smoking a cigarette. We pull up to this hospital, and she gets out, and she's like, come on, let's go. And my hand won't open. It's literally stuck to the steering wheel. And she's like, come on, let's go. And I'm holding the steering wheel, and I'm like, I can't open my hand. And she's like, shut up. Let's go. She didn't want to go to the hospital. It was like a major inconvenience for her. My hand's curled around the steering wheel. And I'm like, I seriously cannot open my hand. It's stuck, curled around the steering wheel. And she said, there's no way that's even possible. I'm like, why would I make something like that up? And we get in this big argument about it. We're like arguing, and I'm stuck. This hand is stuck to the steering wheel, and I'm like using all this body language to talk shit to her. It looks ridiculous. Eventually, she goes into the hospital, and she tells them what's going on. She said that I had some sort of abscess on my hand, and now my hand was stuck to the steering wheel. And a nurse comes out, and she's like touching my hand. She's looking at it, and she's like feeling, and she's like, yeah, this abscess, it looks like you have cellulitis. And it probably compromised some sort of nerve right there, and it made your hand curl like that. I was like, well, what do you do? And they had to have a doctor come out to the steering wheel and shoot me up, I think with like cortisone, or I'm not sure. They shot me up with something, and it like gave some sort of mobility to my hand again. They took me into the hospital. So they actually, like 4 or 5 nurses and doctors had to come out to the car and service me out there. It was crazy. They were like all, taking my vitals. They were taking my blood pressure. They were taking my temperature. They were looking at this abscess. They were like, that's one of the worst abscesses we've ever seen. It looks like cellulitis. We've never seen a hand lose functionality like that over a steering wheel. It looked ridiculous. It was like stuck like that. I was thinking that my hand was permanently going to be gimped out like that, like in Scary Movie. But they shot me up with something, and eventually, within like, I'd say an hour, I start getting functionality back. Just a little, but it's still blown up like a balloon. They give me an x-ray. Sure enough, I had cellulitis. They actually gave me a shot of Dilaudid because I was in pain. And they knew that I had gotten the cellulitis from doing IV heroin and meth. They shot me up with Dilaudid anyway, which is a bonus. But they had taken an x-ray, and they're like, look, you have to go to the USC Medical Center and you have to get surgery on this. You might lose all function in your hand if you don't get surgery. They wanted me to go in like the following day to the USC Medical Center. And I was like, yeah, and they gave me some antibiotics, and I had an appointment to go meet with some sort of surgeon the next day at the USC Medical Center. So we end up going back to the motel. We keep binging out on the heroin and meth, and I don't ever go to the surgery, and they call me once and that's it. And my hand gets worse again. It's starting to curl. And I keep telling her, I'm like, I really think I should go to the hospital. And she's just like, I don't want to go wait again. Last time took forever. I'm like, I don't know. They said that I might lose function in my hand. I think that's worth waiting for an hour. I want to have function in my hand for the rest of my life. She's like, I don't want to go. And I don't want to go alone. So I was like, fuck it. We won't go. So finally I turn my phone on, and I get a call from my federal probation officer. And he's like, hey, Ryan, this is so... I don't even remember what that PO's name was. They switched me periodically, and I don't remember back then during that period what that guy's name was. But he's like, hey, Mr. Leone, this is so-and-so. Just calling because I need you to come in and do an office visit. He didn't say anything about the sober living. I had one message from the house manager from the sober living. And he's like, hey, man, your PO had called and asked if you were still staying here. I covered for you, but you need to check in with me. And that was a message from like 4 or 5 days before. And then my PO had called me like, I don't know, I think the message was from 1 day before that. So he had covered for me for the right time, but I knew that it was a ticking time bomb and that I actually had to go into my federal probation or they were going to start getting suspicious. Problem was I was strung out like a lab rat, and I was telling Haley that. I'm like, dude, how am I going to go see my PO when my hand is curled like the Crypt Keeper? He's going to know something's up. Plus, I had acne. If she looked like Christina Applegate before, now she looked like the fucking Scarecrow from Wizard of Oz. Like, she looks scary. Kind of creature you don't even want to take out in public. It's like, you see people like that once in a while, especially if you're at like some 24-hour market or something, and it's like 4 a.m. You see like meth creatures kind of like creeping down the hallway and or the aisles of the store, and you generally only see them at like 3 or 4 a.m. That's how she looked. She didn't look like she had any business being exposed to sunlight. You know, she had big sores all over her face. She looked horrible. I looked horrible as well. And then my hand on top of it. But I had to go see my PO the next day. And we're still living at the motel, and we're still selling the panties, but I felt an impending sense of doom because my PO wanted me to go in, and I thought for sure he was going to know something was up. I knew the sober living manager wasn't going to cover me forever, and we will get into what happens with all that in part 8 of the Relapse series. Also, I want to say the day after New Year's, I'm sending out a bunch of BLOTTER and books. I know right after Paul died, I got disorganized. Some people had ordered stuff, and I've been lagging. Remember, send me an email at ryanleone313@gmail.com. If you've been waiting on a book or BLOTTER for a while, and for some reason I didn't get it to you, I'm sure a lot of people will vouch in the comment section. Once in a while, I forget, something slips through the crack, but I always make it right. I'll send you something for free, make it worth the wait, and I apologize for that. I'm also doing a special deal. I'm doing a signed copy of my book and a signed blotter, acid, limited edition piece for $40 for both. It includes shipping, $60 if it's international. But I usually do the book for $20 and the blotter for $40, so $60, but I'm doing them both for $40. Shipping included until the new year. Special deal I have, and I'm trying not to get so, to ask at the end of the videos if people want to purchase any of my merchandise or if they want to contribute any donations, because I don't want it to interfere with the actual storytelling ability. I'm grateful for everyone that supports my channel, but I do have a living to earn. If you want to support me, buying a signed copy of my book, buying a signed blotter is definitely a good way to do so. The album is going to come out very soon, and be on the lookout for the announcement for the exact date when it drops. I appreciate you. Believe me, the story's going to get fucking crazier and crazier. Palabra.